14 tips to transform your ERAS application for the match so that it can become an interview magnet and get you as many as interviews as you like. In this video, you will join me. I'm currently a psychiatry resident in the US and I've edited countless ERAS CVs of applicants and had them match. I also have with me a special guest. This is Alina. Alina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Alina. I'm a surgery resident and I've been doing interview prep and review for over 3 years now and have helped more than 50 students match into competitive programs.
Wow. Okay. So Alina's prepared these 14 tips from her own experience, and I thought these were incredible. So please make sure to follow these for your match application if you want to get interviews. So Alina, let's start. So take us through like tip 1 to 14.
Yeah, let's do it. So tip 1 is actually the most important one. And this is what I call a CARI formula. I came up with this a few years ago. And CARI stands for context, action, result, and insight. So this is exactly the way that you want to structure your activity descriptions for maximum impact. So for context, you really want to tell us where, what scale. So really just one short clause to set the scope. For action, you want to start with a very strong verb. There's a list of power verbs that we can link for you below and really focus on what you did. You want to go through many different responsibilities, really cover everything. Even if you think it was not super significant, you want to make sure you're giving the reader a really good picture of what doing that activity was like. Finally, we want to have a result. You really want to quantify any outcomes with numbers, ranges, or proportions. So number of charts reviewed or number of patients seen during a visit. Finally, you want to end with insight. And insight is really just 1 to 2 lines of reflection to show what you learned and how it has shaped you. So, for example, we can have something like at a safety net clinic, and this would be your context. Piloted a 6-item triage checklist, that would be your action, cutting wait times 28% across 120 visits, which would be your result. This taught me to prioritize under pressure, aligning with EM's pace. Of course, this is a very concise example, and generally you're going to want to include much longer descriptions. Tip number 2, you want to write like you talk. So short, direct sentences, no complicated language. Don't look up a bunch of thesaurus words, and really write the way that you'd be just talking to a colleague in a professional setting. Number 3, you really don't want to have cliches really anywhere in your application. This includes your personal statement, even geographic preference descriptions, or of course ERAS activities. So for example, a cliche, I learned the importance of teamwork. That's not really going to stand out. Anyone can put that into their application, and it doesn't really show that there's been any insight or reflection into what you did during that activity.
So something I tell people even in the PS is never kill any of your family member in the first paragraph, because again, that's a cliche. But in a sea of applicants, you want to be a big whale, right? And to be a big whale, you have to be a pattern interrupt. Everyone's using these patterns. You want to stand out by doing something entirely different so they remember you.
All right, and tip number 4, I mentioned this already, but it's to use power verbs, and power verbs are strong verbs. So some examples I like are led, implemented, build, streamlined, audited, coordinated. And really, if you're doing bullet points versus paragraphs, you can actually just start your bullet point with a power verb. I coordinated a conference featuring X speaker.
I have a question. So let's say, what are the action verbs they should not use or they should be wary of or careful of? What are like instant killers that you've seen in applications?
Instant killers, I would say.
Would you say observed is one, something that's very passive,
Yeah.
watched or joined or just plain collaborated? It's not as good as spearheaded or led, which is so strong. So you want to avoid passive verbs.
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid passive verbs because observing or watching, that's not really something that you contributed. So if you just really focus on talking about your contributions, that can help you stay away from these passive kinds of verbs. And tip number 5, make it quantifiable. Anything where you can add numbers is great. This really gives program directors an idea of the impact that was made. Patients seen, percent improvement saved, charts reviewed, what the outcome was of the research study. Really anything that you can measure can give a very good idea of the impact that was made. Tip number 6, you want to stay applicant centered. So this again echoes the not having passive verbs. So you want to write about your actions, what you did. Not what you observed, not what the team did, not what somebody else did. Personal statements, I always tell my students, be the hero of your own story. So very similar thing applies here. You want you to be the hero of your own story rather than praising somebody else or talking about somebody else's contributions. And tip number 7, I do generally recommend using bullet points rather than paragraphs just because it's easier on the eyes. And if you prefer paragraphs, it's totally fine. It's not going to hold your application back. But bullet points can make it really easy and can save you actually a lot of characters so you can add more of an impact and more skills to it rather than having just walls of text and having kind of other words take up space that may not be necessary. And tip number 8, you want to reflect in your most meaningful. I can't tell you how many times I've seen students just write down a list of skills or a list of values or characteristics under most meaningful. You want to avoid doing that. So the reflection should start with you. So I learned that I really enjoyed teaching and I want that to be a part of my future career in residency or as an attending. So that's a reflection about you, and that's generally what these should be. I actually also recommend adding a reflection even to the experiences that you don't mark as most meaningful. So that's a part of the CARI, the insight. So having 1 or 2 bullet points with a reflection, even if the experience was not marked as most meaningful. And tip number 9, we did get into this a little bit earlier, but really just to reinforce that, please avoid having passive voice as well. A team of 5 was managed by me or by someone else versus I managed a team of 5. So that is much more direct, much more powerful. Number 10, read it out loud. And this I really applied to just the whole application, personal statement, anything that you're ever submitting anywhere, even research papers. Reading it out loud will help you catch any awkward language or awkward wording or anything that may sound like too robotic. So it's really the fastest way to help yourself polish anything that you're ever turning in. Tip number 11, you want to sprinkle in unique details. So really anything creative, anything you designed, anything you came up with, any challenges you faced that you overcame. PDs love reading about overcoming challenges. So if you can sprinkle that in throughout your activity, that will really help. And one way that I also test if something is unique or not is I tell the applicant, if you take this out and you put it into somebody else's application who's also applying to this specialty, will that sentence or will this paragraph still make sense in someone else's application? And if it will, then that means that it's not really unique to you. That's a really quick way that you can test if something is unique and creative. Tip number 12. So you can use AI, but don't copy and don't have it actually write the descriptions for you. The only way you should use this is to maybe help you brainstorm ideas and also to fix any grammar or spelling or like that. But really do not use AI to write descriptions. It's very obvious. I can tell when students do it and they come to me to edit their descriptions and we just end up having to really rewrite all of that. And tip number 13, don't neglect the hobbies section. And ideally you want to include interesting hobbies. So here too, I would try to avoid cliches. Oh, I work out, or I go to the gym. Oh, maybe something more specific. Okay, I run or I weight lift. Really kind of avoid generic stuff here. I cannot tell you how many interviews in general surgery asked me about my hobbies. I think almost every interview we talked about one or more of the hobbies I listed. So I really cannot emphasize enough how important this section is. And finally, tip 14, geographic preferences. You want to use these 300 characters very strategically. So things that you want to include here are real ties to the area. So that's family or friends nearby, any school that you went through in that region. If did you go to college there or medical school? Did you do rotations there or live there for a period of time? Any kind of community connections to the area. So anything here that ties you to the area. What PDs are looking for here is that you want to be in that location and that also you have a support system in that location, because that is just so important for residency.
All right, thank you so much for those amazing tips, Alina. I think I learned a lot from that. So I just wanted to ask you, where can anyone find you if they need your help?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's dr.alinamd. I am also planning to start a YouTube channel soon, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so guys, I'll mention that link below. I'll also put in a link to our newsletter if you guys want to join. We just push out USMLE updates before anyone gets to find about them, so you can have your advantage. But again, thank you for watching.